So part 3, we looked at the code to find the pointer to the last node of the list. So we did the design part of it, and we typed the code in to make sure that that's working, but we still have to use it to actually append to the list and not prepend to the list. So let's take a look at that last piece of it. So if we take a look at our code currently inside of main has us finding the last node on the list, right? So that works, and we tested it and made sure that this is correct. But what we wanted to do is, instead of this code up here, which is prepending, right? So this does a prepend new node with input value. Now we want to do append to the end of the list. So we have to change this part of the code right here. So we could do it as a function. We could put it in place and then later make it a function. So why don't we first think about how we would do this part of it. So let's go back to the drawing board for the design part and think about how we can use this. Now that we have this function that gives us the last node of the list in every circumstance, how might we use that? So to use this to append a new node to the end of the list, right? So again, we have the cases where the list is empty. What's it going to do the first time? And if there's already something on the list, we're going to append after whatever currently is on the list, and we have to think about that. So, so we have list is empty, first of all, or we do something there, and then maybe we have a list has at least one node on it, right? So if the list is empty when we call it, well, we could just check, right? If p head is null, we'd know if list is empty. And if the list has at least one node on it, then the head of the list is not empty, right? So p head is null there, and here p head is not equal to null. So that check would be pretty straightforward to find that out for the first time, right? And then we think about what is it that we actually want to do. So in each case, we're going to get a new node. So get a new node and store the input number on it. And then we want to connect it in, right? So if the list is empty, so we want to store the input number on it. And in this case, and make p next equal to null, because it's going to be the last one on the list each time, right? And then we want to connect it together. So in both cases, we're going to do this. We're going to get a new node and store the input number on it. And then here, in this case, if the list is empty, so we have this new node. So then we'd make p head, set p head to point to this new node, right? And if the list has at least one node on it, then we want to find the last node on the list, right? So we could say node star pointer to the last node is equal to, and then we can call our function. What was this thing called again? Find the last node on the list, right? So we call it this. Find the last node on the list. And after we found the last node on the list, make this last node point to the new node that already has something on it. So we draw a little picture of what this looks like. So this case, the list is empty. So p head is null. So we've got our before and after pictures here. So before, it looks like this. P head is null. There it is. Give ourselves a little bit more space. And then we can think about what does it look like after. So before p head is null, And we also, we get a new node up here. In both cases, we get a new node. So let's say we have ptemp points to this new node. So ptemp points to the new node. Right, and so we have this new node here. And the new node has the input value, and let's say has a null on it. Ptemp points to it. So we've got this. Phead is null. Ptemp points to this new node. So set phead to point to this new node is pretty straightforward. We just have to do that. So the operation that we have to store is setting phead to be equal to ptemp. So that is pretty straightforward. Down here, if the list has at least one node on it, so here we'd have phead is pointing to some node, and that maybe is pointing to some other node and maybe some other node, right? We could have multiples on the list, and the last one is null, and these all point to each other like this, right? And let's say our input was whatever, 357, the values that I've been using. Let's say this is what our list looks like. Actually, let me change that. If we're appending to the list, then 3 would be stored here as the first one. If our input is 357, -1. And let's put some other number there, 9, right? And then -1. So if we have 3, 5, and 7, and it looks like this, and then we, those are our inputs, and then we get the input of 9, and so we'd have ptemp. We're getting a new node with ptemp, and ptemp points to this new node. Here's this new node, and we do these things. So we store the input number into it. So let's say it's the 9, and we make p next is equal to null. So this is equal to null, like this. And now we want to connect it together. So we find the last node on the list down here. So we find the last node, so we'd have the pointer to the last node. And after we have the pointer to the last node like that, then we have to connect it together. So, sorry, this is wrong. That's not the pointer to the last node. Pointer to the last node is over here. This is the pointer to the last node, right? So pointer to the last node is there. Now we want to connect them together. So this isn't too hard, right? Because if I point to the last node, I just take this part of it and I make it point to what ptemp points to. And so that is fairly straightforward. So our instructions for this, if we give ourselves just a little more room here, scooch this stuff down just a little bit. There we go. So we have here, our instruction to do this would be pointer to the last node, arrow p next is equal to ptemp, like that, right? So where ptemp is this temporary node that we created up here, right? So get a new node, maybe using ptemp, right? And store the input number on it. So something like that up here. Okay, so now we can go in and put this code in there. So we have two cases. The list is empty. The list has at least one node on it. Let's go and look at our code window and think about how that works. So here's our code window again. Here we go. So this is in main. In here. So this all is going to go away. So now we have to first get, so getting ptemp with the new node and the data and p next is equal to null. This stuff is, so now we're going to append. So append the new node with the input value. So I get a new node, put the data into it, make its next pointer to be null, because here we can see, right, the next pointer is always going to be null for each time. In both cases, we get the new node, put the number on it, and then make its next pointer to be null, like this, okay? And then we want to connect it together. So we're going to get the pointer to the head of the list here. So node star p last node. Actually, up here, we can just check to see if phead is null. So for the first case, so see if it is the first node. So if p head is equal to null, so if p head is equal to null, then we simply make p head is equal to p temp, as we saw here. So p head is equal to p temp. Make this the new head of the list. Okay, else down here, else p head is not equal to null, right? So there is at least more than one node. So now we're going to call our function that we wrote already up here, find the last node on the list. We're going to call this function, find the last node on the list. And we already tested that. So find the last node on the list. We're going to send it the head of the list, right, to start out with. And it returns a pointer to the last node. So we have to keep track of this. Node star pointer to the last node equals, so we get the pointer to the last node on the list. And once we have done this, we have the pointer to the last node on the list. Now we want to make the pointer to the last node, make its next pointer point to this new node that we have here. So pointer to the last node is equal to p temp, as we've seen here. So pointer to the last node, make its next pointer point to this new node that we created up here. Okay. All right. And we're starting to stack up these braces. So this one is the end of the if, and this one here is the end of the while. End of the while. Okay, so if we have to insert code, it's easier to see. All right, so now when we display the list, if the input is 357, the output when we traverse the list should be the same as the input order and not the reverse as it's been in the past. So we can go and run this and see what happens, see if all this has worked now for us. So if we type in 357 -1, what do you think the output's going to be? 357. Same order, because now each new number goes at the end of the list. We're appending it to the list. So now we've not only thought about writing this function to find the last node on the list, we're using it in this case a little bit inefficient because we have to traverse the list each time to go find the last one, but this will come in handy for us when we write a separate function.